I'm sure many of you have already heard that Samsung is releasing a special edition of the Z Fold. And I'm not surprised. There were a lot of rumors about that before the release of the Z Fold 6. So I was already kind of prepared for it. But I'm not so sure that everything was handled quite right with Samsung. So for the first part of this video, I want to cover the differences between the Z Fold 6 and the new special edition Z Fold. And then I want to rant a bit about how I think Samsung fumbled this whole situation. So let's get started with the first thing that's different, and that's going to be the dimensions and the size of the inner and outer screens. So in comparison, the Z Fold 6 has a 6.3 inch outer screen, and the special edition phone is going to have a 6.5. The inside, or in Samsung's terms, the main screen, was also increased to 8 inches compared to the 7.6 on the Z Fold 6. And that's going to also change the aspect ratio to, on the front screen, it's going to be more like the traditional phones, and on the inner screen is going to be more of that square aspect ratio. Now, I'm not sure that's the best dimensions for the phone. I actually quite like the dimensions of the Z Fold 6. I think just with tweaking the bezel sizes and, getting the screen closer to the edge, it's going to get the phone to the dimensions that it needs to be rather than making the phone larger. But either way, it's gonna be what a lot of the fans want. But another change that was with the inner screen is that Samsung went ahead and improved the crease. Something that's been asked for I don't know, since the thing came out, but especially since the Z Fold 5, because OnePlus came out with a better inner screen, or at least a smaller crease. So that looks like it's been improved. I don't know to exactly what degree it was improved to, but I would imagine it's probably pretty close to the OnePlus Open if people are talking about it like if it's a big improvement. So the dimensions are a bit wider and taller, but they also made it thinner. Thin to the point of that it matches or is really close to the Pixel 9 Pro Fold's dimensions in terms of thickness. And that's going to make it, at least in terms of size, compete directly with the thinnest foldables that we have here in the US. But with that, obviously, they're going to have to reconfigure the battery sizes, and even though it wasn't a drastic drop, it's still going to be a smaller battery in what's already a pretty small battery in the category as it is. And that's not going to ruin your experience by any means, but it would make it really close to failing my battery test that I have all these phones go through. But again, my test is with heavy use, so normal day-to-day, it shouldn't be an issue. The second change is going to be the increase in RAM. So the Z Fold 6 has 12 gigabytes of RAM, and the special edition is going to have 16 gigabytes. Now, that's not going to be a game changer in current times because the Z Fold 6's 12 gigs of RAM works just fine, and I don't see it being an issue in the near future. But it could be a bigger issue further down the line. And the 16 gigabytes of RAM is basically just going to future-proof the phone even more. So even though it's not a game changer, it's kind of just like a security blanket for the future. And the third change, I think, is the biggest and probably the most important change based on what I've read about, what fans want. And that's going to be that the camera, or at least the main sensor, is going to be changed to a 200 megapixel sensor. The size of the sensor hasn't been released, but just based on the megapixels, it seems like it's going to be like the one that's found on the S24 Ultra, which is going to be a pretty big improvement in, well, for sure, megapixels, but if it is that same sensor, it's going to be a pretty big improvement in size as well. And with size, you're going to get better performance. You're going to get more light in the sensor. You're going to get more background blur. It's just going to be overall better. But I don't want to blindly trust that this is the actual one from the S24 Ultra. I want to see the size of the sensor first. I wouldn't put it past, some of these companies to, just give it the same megapixels, but watch it be a smaller sensor than the one that we actually wanted. But let's say, just for the argument of this video, that it is the S24 Ultra sensor, and that's going to be, I don't know how drastic of a change is going to be because the 50 megapixel in the Z Fold 6 is not the worst, but the S24 Ultra's camera is better, so that's what we wanted. So I think it's a nice change. I just think it should have been added to the Z Fold 6. So now I want to get into the rant, and why do these changes just rub me the wrong way? I think it's because Samsung increased the price of the Z Fold 6 by $100, and they didn't really make any spec improvements. They only made design and weight improvements, which I'm happy with, and it would have been just fine if they didn't come out with the special edition. Now, the special edition is a bit more expensive, but it's not otherworldly compared to the Z Fold 6. And I think Samsung could have easily put all of these changes into the Z Fold 6, even if we exclude the screen changes and the dimensions of the phone. And based on when the Z Fold 6 was first released, my initial review was pretty positive about it, just because you don't really see too many spec changes in any industry when there's a major design change. And I think that this constitutes a major design change because, I mean, you could tell it apart from a mile away compared to the Z Fold 5. But now that in the same year, not even 6 months later, just a couple months later, they're coming out with another phone that is going to have the specs that we want, it should have been all packaged into the new Z Fold 6. And remember that at the time of the release of my video, the rumor was that they were going to make a cheaper version of it. And, you know, a cheaper version is not going to have a 200 megapixel camera. So the fact that they went the opposite way and made a more expensive version is part of the problem, I think, at least in my eyes. And I've heard a lot of reviewers say that, you know, this is going to be a test for them because they weren't sure how it was going to perform in terms of sales. I call BS on that because the changes that they made on the special edition is exactly what the fans were asking for, and by a pretty big demand. So by them making that change on the Z Fold 6, I guarantee it would have sold even better than the Z Fold 6 has so far. For me, I don't think this was actually Samsung trying to see if they could reduce their risk. I think it was more like Samsung trying to see if they could charge even more for the next Z Fold. And if this phone sells out, I think that the next Z Fold might have some of these features, which would be great, but it might also be $2,000 instead of $1,900. And as a big Samsung fan and a consumer of basically almost their entire premium lineup, I kind of feel let down with this whole situation. At this point, all I can do is hope that Samsung makes the best decision for us in the next Z Fold and includes all of these upgrades that are on the SE, but don't actually increase the price to $2,000. I hope I'm proven wrong and Samsung actually delivers with what I'm hoping they deliver, but I wouldn't be surprised if my fear of them increasing the price actually comes true. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. How do you feel about how the SE came out so soon after the Z Fold 6 and that it's in a limited market? And if you didn't buy the Z Fold 6 because you thought that the price was too high and there weren't enough changes, would the changes on the SE have made a difference for you to actually, you know, dive in and buy the phone? Or is it just not enough of a change even with that? Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, I'll see you next time.